Joining us now is former Speaker of the House and Vice Chair of the Trump transition team, Newt Gingrich. He is also the author of the upcoming novel, Treason. Welcome, Mr. Speaker. Does Donald Trump have a mandate?
Well, I think, first of all, he won, and he won pretty decisively in the Electoral College. And I think the deeper thing is the Republicans won the House, they won the Senate, they won the governorships, most Republican governors in history, most Republican state legislators in history. So if you look at the country, there's certainly a shift towards Republican government on a pretty big scale.
Is it a challenge for him that he didn't win the popular vote?
To some extent, but remember, in 49 states, he had a 2,200,000 vote majority, and then there's California. We don't compete in California. The current rules of the game, we're not going to carry California, and it's a sad cycle. They don't invest because they're not going to carry it, so it gets worse every year. If this had been a general election where the total vote mattered, we'd have competed in California.
Are you still a fan of getting rid of the Electoral College? You used to be.
Well, I think in the long run, you want to find a way to have the whole country represented. But my point is, if we had total vote mattering, we would have competed in California. Right. And we would probably have picked up at least 2 million votes just by competing.
Let's talk about the pace of change. Should Donald Trump swing for the fences or go for singles?
Swing for the fences. I've done this twice in my career.
Yeah.
I did it with Reagan in '81. I did it as Speaker in '95. This is a city which, if you don't shove it as hard as you can while you have momentum, will just surround you. I mean, the swamp doesn't want to be drained, and the swamp will just suck you in if you let it. So he needs to have a very, very aggressive first year.
When I covered your presidential race and run in 2012, you made a case for incrementalism. You said, on 2 cases, you said, you know, when the country is as bitterly divided, and you put your name on a program and think any Democrat is going to vote for it, you have to go. Your argument was you have to go out and sell it, and that you have to. So explain how you swing for the fences, shove this country, but aren't moving too fast.
Well, 2 things. First of all, I recommend all of our viewers, they read a terrific book called The Education of Ronald Reagan, which really captures Reagan at General Electric and shows you what he learned about moving the country. So you've got to move the country. Trump's got to be the salesman. Second, you take something big like infrastructure. He can work with Chuck Schumer on infrastructure. He can find a bipartisan path that allows us to dramatically improve infrastructure, something Trump knows an immense amount about. And you could have a very big bipartisan bill on infrastructure. I suspect on tax reform, there's a chance to actually put together a tax reform package, which also, as Speaker Paul Ryan has pointed out today, also means you can handle a lot of the tariff differentials inside the tax code in a way that could be very advantageous to American business.
You know, back in 12, you also said, we got mad at Obama because he ran over us when we said don't do it. Well, Republicans ought to follow that same ground rule. Does that still apply?
I think it's very important that Trump try to have as many Democrats as possible help him do this, because one of the lessons of the Obama years is if you do things that are big on a purely partisan basis, they're not stable. Yeah. I mean, and I think Trump wants to change America to make it great again for a generation, not just for 8 years.
What has he done since being elected president that made you think, gee, that's different?
Well, I mean, I think, first of all, his speech on his victory speech was very conciliatory, very much in the right direction. I think his visit to the White House was very respectful on both sides, and I think encouraging in that sense. I think his meeting with Paul Ryan and with Mitch McConnell, and the fact that he's integrating Mike Pence so thoroughly, which also happened with Cheney. As you remember, Cheney as vice president led the transition. Pence as vice president is going to lead the transition. I think all those things show you steps towards stability and maturity that are very, very encouraging.
Paul Ryan said today on CNN that there's not going to be a deportation force. Mr. Trump has said that he's going to incorporate some ideas of Obamacare, which he talked about on the stump too. Now that he's president, are a lot of the things that seem to be bright lines in the campaign, are they much more negotiable?
Well, I think if you listen to the brief section you had from 60 Minutes, there are going to be substantial deportations. They're called criminals. I mean, 2 million people would be a lot of people to deport. And if at the same time you gain control of the border, and if you passed a guest worker program, you'd be a long way towards then, 3 or 4 or 5 years from now, dealing with the rest of the folks who are here without legal permission. And I think by that stage we would accommodate it in some way. I think in terms of Obamacare, it's going to be repealed, but there are certain aspects of it that are very widely supported. And if you know, you don't want to capriciously take away the right of somebody to be on their parents' insurance till 26. You want to protect the right to have insurance coverage without any kind of precondition. But that means if you're not going to have a mandate, which we're not, and it hasn't been effective, I mean, they can't punish young people with taxes enough to get them to buy insurance, then you better have a high-risk pool, which Paul Ryan has suggested, or some device so that if you have a precondition but you're not insured, you still are going to get health care.
Let me ask you about the sense of conflict in this country. There were 60 million people who didn't vote for Mr. Trump. Why should, or help explain to somebody who didn't vote for him and who, you know, there were people going around saying, not my president. In part, Donald Trump rose to prominence by challenging the idea that Barack Obama was a legitimate president, said he wasn't born in America, there was no evidence of that, spent 5 years saying he was illegitimate. Why should anybody who doesn't like Donald Trump think, oh, well, I should think he's legitimate now?
Well, it's a question of whether or not you want America to be a successful venture. And I think, frankly, if you're hard left, it's very hard to imagine why you're going to accommodate a Trump presidency. Because the two goals of this, remember, George W. Bush was attacked from day one by the hard left. Obama was attacked from day one by conservatives. We've now been through 16 years of this siege warfare. Yeah. And interestingly, while we got involved in a fight with Clinton, no one ever attacked the legitimacy of the Clinton presidency, or Bush one, or Reagan, or Carter for that matter.
Part of what this stems from is the campaign that Mr. Trump ran. In the National Review, Ian Tuttle writes about this divisive campaign. He says, quote, his victory in the primaries gave unprecedented visibility to the alt-right, a small but vocal fringe of white supremacists and anti-Semites and self-proclaimed fascists. Supporting a President Trump cannot mean giving a pass to the ugly fringe that has risen with him. What does Donald Trump have to do to address that?
I just have to say that's garbage.
Even though it's coming from the National Review.
Yeah, I don't care where it's at. This whole notion, it's like the Washington Post had this columnist the other day who pointed out that we were on the anniversary of Kristallnacht, which was the night when the Nazis attacked Jewish businesses. And I'm thinking, I mean, this is crazy. Donald Trump is a mainstream conservative who wants to profoundly take on the left. The left is infuriated that anybody would challenge the legitimacy of their moral superiority. And so the left goes hysterical. But the fact is, you know, and you get this with all these smears of Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon is a naval officer. He was a managing partner at Goldman Sachs. He was a Hollywood movie producer. You know, the idea that somehow he represents, I'd never heard of the alt-right until the nutcase started writing about it.
But so your point is, it's garbage, therefore Donald Trump doesn't have to deal with it.
Donald Trump has to be Donald Trump, and the country will organize itself around who he is.
Does being Donald Trump mean keeping the Twitter account? What's your advice on that?
My advice to that is to always have an editor.
But still keep tweeting.
Yeah, well, sure. I mean, look, it's a technique for reaching 13 or 14 million people at no cost and gets him around the New York Times.
What do you want to do in this administration, if anything?
I want to help plan the restructuring of the federal government.
And so that sounds like a domestic role.
No, it's the restructuring of the federal government.
One of the questions
including
people,
state and defense.
One of the questions people had about Donald Trump is whether anyone can tell him no. Can anyone tell Donald Trump no?
Oh, maybe Ivanka or Melania? I don't know.
And
I mean, look, this is a very strong-willed guy who has risen in remarkable ways. He's worth $4 to $10 billion. He beat 15 other people for the nomination. He beat Secretary Clinton for the presidency. He took on virtually the entire national media and beat them. He has a great deal of faith in his own instincts. And you have to say, most days he's more right than we were.
All right. Speaker Gingrich, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.